Steven Tyler, lead singer and frontman of Aerosmith for over half a century, is one of the most well-known and well-respected musicians of the previous generation. However, did his actions almost 50 years ago completely taint his reputation? Was it a case of different time, different rules? Does no one care because he's basically geriatric at this point and on his way out? Who knows? Hey, what's going on, guys? It's Joe Zile here, and I'm here talking about Steven Tyler and everything that came out about him this year and last year and the year before and the year... I'm kidding. I'm just talking about what happened here recently. There was someone that came out with some damning allegations. There's only one aspect of it that I think is really bad. There's another aspect that can be argued between people, and it's been argued for years and years and years if it's actually bad or not. We're going to be talking about that today. I'm going to be going over everything that I can. I've researched this back to front. I've looked through so many testimonies. I looked through so much stuff, so many emails, and I think I came to a conclusion of what actually happened and what's going on here. I don't have strong feelings one way or the other. Like I said, there's one aspect to it that I think is pretty bad that I'm very, very against, but we'll go over that later. So yeah, if you guys like this video, give it a like, comment, and subscribe. I really love making videos like this, and I'm gonna keep doing them until I don't want to, which hopefully is never. Steven Victor Tallarico, aka Steven Tyler, was born on March 26, 1948, which would make him a 33 life path. If you don't know much about life path, just look up numerology. It's much more interesting than astrology, and I don't necessarily believe in it entirely, but there are a lot of coincidences in numerology. A 33 is basically like top of the line life path, and it's the rarest you can get. It basically means massive influence. People like Gandhi, Nelson Mandela, Einstein, John Lennon, they were all 33s. It's really interesting stuff. I'm sorry, my autism is showing. I'm going to get back to Steven Tyler. My bad. Steven was born in Manhattan, New York, and then moved to the Bronx when he was 3 years old. His mother, Susan Ray Blancho Tallarico, was a secretary, while his father, Victor A. Tallarico, was a classical musician and pianist who taught school at Cardinal Spellman High School in the Bronx. As a teenager, Tyler attended Roosevelt High School in Yonkers, New York. Wait a second. Yonkers, New York? Steven Tyler? Tyler the Creator? Yonkers the song. Steven was expelled from Roosevelt High School for marijuana use, but later graduated from Quintano School for Young Professionals, which I looked up Quintano School for Young Professionals, and the only thing I could find was a locked Facebook page that states it's for alumni or anybody interested in the school for the purpose of reuniting old friends, sharing memories, and preserving the history of the school because the original building is no longer in existence. I also found this old webpage that's called oldfriends.co, which lists everybody that attended that school. And if you scroll all the way down to the class of 1967, boom, there he is, Steven Tallarico. I had no other reason of doing this other than my own curiosity, so yeah, there you go. At 17 years old, Tyler spent time in Greenwich Valley, New York, which was a pivotal moment in his life because he and his friends got to see a Rolling Stones concert. Tyler said, recounting his experience, that he and his friends hung around for a while, buzzing like crazy just because we got to touch them. He said, quote, "Everybody told me that I looked just like Mick Jagger with my big lips, and Keith Richards basically was the music I used to love more than anything." None of this was caught on film or recorded or anything because, I mean, it was the 60s, you know, like cameras weren't that accessible yet. No, yeah, we got pictures of it. This is Steven Tyler photobombing Mick Jagger. Before Aerosmith, Steven wrote what would later become one of the band's most iconic songs, Dream On, in 1969. Shortly after, Tyler met his future bandmates, Joe Perry, who would go on to play guitar, and Tom Hamilton, who would go to play bass. Both Joe and Tom were already playing in a band called The Jam Band, and Tyler later stated that he was struck by their raw power and attitude. And if I'm being completely honest, The Jam Band absolutely sucks as a name, and Aerosmith is just way better. It's kind of one of those things like if you see a kid named Tim or if you see one named Zach or Nick or Tom or whatever, and you look at them and you're like, yeah, you look like a Zach, or you look like a Tim, or you look like a Tom or whatever. It's like, when you look at Aerosmith, it's like, yes, this is Aerosmith. They should be Aerosmith. This is a perfect name for this band. Later, having Ray Tabano and Joey Kramer come to play rhythm guitar and drums respectively, and Aerosmith was formed. However, Ray would be replaced with Brad Whitford shortly after because of Tabano's lack of passion and commitment, yada yada. You know, he lost his chance, basically. Now, if I were to sit here and go over every aspect of this band's history, we would quite literally be here all day, because as you can imagine, their story is widely documented over their half of century being together. But I'm going to go over some cliff notes I think are worth noting, particularly focusing on Steven Tyler's side, because of course, that is why you clicked this video. Along with the rest of the band, Steven moved to the Boston area and shared a small apartment in Alliston in the fall of the 1970s, and by this time, they had become full-time musicians and recording artists. As many of you are probably already aware, Steven had and still has absolutely crazy vocal ability, enough so he was dubbed the Demon of Seaman, the Demon of Screamin'. Okay, I'm not here to completely tear Steven apart because as a musician, I have massive respect for him, so I will at least show you the good part. Steven had a knack for theatrics and was known for his extremely eccentric performances, and he would typically dress in colorful and sometimes androgynous outfits, even sporting makeup and scarves hanging from his microphone. And if you know anything about the 60s and 70s music scene, it was mostly par for the course. I mean, look at artists like Mick Jagger, David Bowie, and Elton John. It was just a different time back then. Aerosmith were quick to put out multiple albums. For 5 years in a row, they were putting out albums every single year. Starting in 73 with their self-titled album, Aerosmith, then 74 with Get Your Wings, then 75 with Toys in the Attic, and 76 with Rocks, and 77 with Draw the Line. Dream On was released in 73 and it was a minor hit, but in 75 and 76 with songs like Sweet Emotion, the re-released version of Dream On, and Walk This Way, they solidified their status as a major rock band. Fast forward to present day and Aerosmith is still touring. Steven, with 4 rehab visits, 21 number 1 hits, 25 gold, 18 platinum, 12 multi-platinum records, and 1 diamond record under his belt, has managed to stay relevant. This is a feat that not many people have managed to accomplish. The only one that comes to mind for me is Ozzy Osbourne, and I'd say both have abused drugs excessively in their life, but Steven still manages to get on stage and perform decently well despite being 75 at the date of this recording. There is no doubt in my mind that being able to live until 2023 was something that Steven Tyler never expected to be one of the accomplishments he's achieved. However, it was something that allegedly happened way back in 1970 that would come back to haunt him into the present day. In December of 2022, a woman by the name of Julia Misley, formerly known as Julia Holcomb, filed a lawsuit against Steven Tyler alleging sexual abuse, coercion of an abortion, and involuntary infamy while she was 16 years old. The suit was filed under the California Child Victims Act, which allows survivors of childhood sexual abuse to file civil cases. However, this alleged abuse occurred over 50 years ago, which would fall out of the statute of limitations for this sort of suit to be filed, so how can she file a lawsuit over something that happened that long ago? Well, in 2019, California passed a new law that opened up a 3-year window for child sexual assault survivors to sue their abusers. Meaning, even outside of assaults that happen past the statute of limitations, a lawsuit can still be filed as long as it's within that 3-year window. This window ended December of 2022, which means she filed the suit right before the window closed. Before the bill was signed into law, an action for recovery of damages suffered as a result of childhood sexual abuse had to be commenced within 8 years of when the plaintiff turned 18 of age, or within 3 years of the date that the plaintiff discovered or reasonably should have discovered that his or her injury was caused by sexual abuse, whichever occurred later. And this was not the first time that Julia had spoke out about her experiences with Steven Tyler.
I met Steven when I was just 16 years old, and he became my legal guardian. I was his ward, and I became pregnant while I was still a teenager, and he reassured me that everything would be all right. I asked to see a doctor, and he refused. He said, no, you can't go to a doctor. They would ask questions about how old you are and how you became pregnant and who the father is. So
multiple times throughout the years, she had been a part of interviews or national television and in a rally against abortion in 2012.
My name is Julia Holcomb, and today I am going to be silent no more.
I'm sure many people chalk this up to just being a disgruntled ex that wanted to get revenge on him for their failed relationship and making up lies and whatever about him, but it was Steven Tyler himself who mentioned Julia in his memoir, Does the Noise in My Head Bother You? So he didn't say her name in the memoir, but this is what he said. He said, I almost took a teen bride, and that her parents fell in love with me, signed a paper over for me to have custody so I wouldn't get arrested if I took her out of state, and I took her on tour with me. And in 2011, Julia decided to come out about her story of the abortion that Steven allegedly forced her to have. Julia accounts in a full testimony that shortly after she turned 16, she met Steven at an Aerosmith concert. They hit it off and began dating afterwards. Steven even convinced her mother to sign over guardianship to him. When asked how he gotten her to sign the papers, he said, I told her I needed them to enroll you in school. In actuality, he just wanted guardianship over so he can travel over state lines so he didn't get arrested while they were on tour. Eventually, Julia became pregnant with Steven's child, and her accounts conflicts with Steven's claim that the pregnancy was unplanned. In fact, Steven expressed a desire to have a child, and Julia was touched by his sincerity and felt loved by the fact he was so adamant on starting a family with her. She even accounted that Steven was ecstatic when she told him the news that she was pregnant, enough so that he asked her to marry him and she said yes. In Julia's mind, life was going good. Though she would use drugs like cocaine from time to time, she wouldn't overdo it like the extent that Steven would. However, it was all downhill from this point forward. While Julia was in the apartment by herself, she woke up and the apartment was filled up with smoke. The entire place was on fire. She accounts that Bill Cosby, of all people, popped into her head. Jesus Christ. There was a commercial at the time where he was apparently teaching fire safety and had said the best place to go in case of a fire is a chimney because the smoke would travel into the chimney, making a pocket of air for someone to sit down in, unaffected by the smoke. So that's what she did. Shortly after, she became unconscious from the fire and then woke up in a hospital room. Steven was there and expressed how glad he was that she was alive. Miraculously, the doctors had said her lungs looked completely unaffected and all of her vitals were fine. But after the doctors had left the room, Steven asked her to have an abortion, insisting that the drug use and the smoke would inevitably cause damage to the child. She said no, and then he asked again, and again, and again, and each time him growing more and more irritated and upset. By the last time, he said, okay, you can go back to your parents and have the baby there then. As he was leaving, Julia accounts that she felt like she was being abandoned like her parents did to her, like he would no longer be there to help her care and take care of the baby. So, with much reluctance, she agreed. Immediately after this, his irritated and angry demeanor changed to joy and excitement. When the nurse came in the room to check on Julia, she asked for the abortion, and when she left to grab the doctor, Steven snorted a line of cocaine and even offered it to Julia. And when she left to grab the doctor, Steven snorted a line of cocaine and even offered it to Julia, which she turned down. She said that he was emotionally detached. Even as he was witnessing the procedure, he seemed unaffected by it. However, this would change shortly after. Now, before I say this next part, I'm going to give a slight trigger warning for this because as much as things like this don't really affect me that often, even whenever I was reading this myself, I was starting to feel uneasy, so Yeah, there you go. Stephen later told Julia that he felt an extreme amount of remorse, regret, and a sense of dread for him basically forcing her to have this abortion. He said that the baby was born alive and allowed to die, which means he basically watched firsthand his own child die right in front of him, which, as a parent myself, I couldn't imagine the feelings one would have watching this firsthand. After this, Julia left Stephen, went back home, and then started attending church, and then met her now husband Joseph, even accounting in 2011 that in spite of everything, she doesn't hate Stephen. Nor was she personally bitter, even said, "I pray for his sincere conversion of heart and hope he can find God's grace." Even stating that the picture of Jesus that was hanging above the chimney she found shelter in the fire was signed by Stephen, and she kept it hanging in her house to this day. So, why the lawsuit? Well, their relationship was a lot worse. According to Julia, he would leave her at the apartment with no food, money, or any way of getting around, and when she asked groceries from him, he sent his old friend Ray Tabano to take her to the grocery store, who, if you remember from earlier, was kicked out of the band because he wasn't committed enough to it. Yes, this was his old childhood friend. She later felt angry that Stephen would insist they have sex in public places, which she did not like at all. Even after them splitting up, she said, "He talked of me as a sex object without any human dignity. I have made a point over these long years never to speak of him. Yet he has repeatedly humiliated me in print with distortions of our time together. I do not understand why he has done this, and it's been very painful." So going all the way back to the bill passed in 2019 for child sexual assault survivors that can sue their abusers within a 3-year time frame, despite any sort of statute of limitations, Julia decided to take that opportunity to seek justice for the things she alleged Tyler did. She said, quote, "I want this action to expose an industry that protects celebrity offenders, to cleanse and hold accountability in the industry that both exploited and allowed me to be exploited for years, along with so many other naive and vulnerable kids and adults. This is not the first time that someone has come out about shady things in the music industry, especially back in those days. Hell, some of those things were completely out in the public for everyone to see." Tyler states that Julia consented to everything, even their sexual relationship. He even went as far to say that he has immunity because he was her legal guardian. He also requested that the lawsuit be dismissed entirely. So there you go. That is basically everything we know right now. There was so much more information on the relationship between Stephen and Julia, but as far as the lawsuit is concerned, I think I covered about everything that would be important to highlight. So for now, we just have to wait and see how everything turns out. As far as Stephen claiming that she consented to their sexual relationship, the age of consent in California is 18. Even back in the 70s, it was 18. And as far as him stating he had immunity because he was her legal guardian, I still think that's messed up either way, but legally, I don't know if it holds any weight in court. Could I Google it and research it? I mean, sure, but there's no way I'm Googling, can you have sex with someone you're a legal guardian to, even if they're under the age of consent? Do you want that in your search history? Not me.